Holla ballers, it's Preacher. We're getting straight into the action on our resto druid. As promised, I'm going to do this in LFR. Okay, so nothing massively difficult, of course. But the good thing about LFR is you get the combination of good players and the bad ones. And the bad ones actually help us out for demonstrating some healer stuff. I chose a couple of bosses that I thought were the better choices. There's only 3 bosses currently in the LFR. But a couple of bosses that demonstrate nicely what I wanted to show you about the resto druid. So a few things to point out. Firstly, on the left, next to my character pane, you can see a little icon. That is my harmony. As we spoke about in the guide, harmony is a buff to all my hots. And I want to keep harmony up as much as possible. When it falls off like that, that means I've just failed miserably. Failed miserably. I'm a bad resto druid. Really bad. All my hots are just doing less now. So let's get harmony back on. Just like that. There's a few instances here of me failing, which is always important to see. One is tracking my life blooms. You can see I have a focus target that I've got my life blooms being tracked on. So I can heal the rest of the raid, and I have my tank on focus. He's my life bloom target. I'm going to keep that tracked as much as possible. So I've got it on my UI, nice and easy, just on my focus target, that I can see the life blooms going. The other thing to note is also on my grid, as I said in the basic guide, is I've gone ahead and I've put rejuve on there. So by adding rejuve to my grid, I can see where my rejuves are. Are they on? Are they off? I'm not spamming somebody with rejuve. I want to make sure that somebody's got rejuve on who needs to go there, especially for swift mend. Now, as I hadn't healed a raid on a resto druid for a very, very long time, there was a lot of things I could have done here which would have allowed me to really destroy the healing meters and play a little bit better. And it's all about how the boss works. That's why there's no set rotation. It's like, how does this boss work? Like, when I see that happening, like this thing's about to overload, it's time to counteract that in some way by either using bark skin or using iron bark on myself or popping a tranquility as I do earlier on, is to counter that and make sure that I've got an effective cooldown for that raid ready when I need it and when it is necessary, when it is needed and when I think it is best to use it. Now, a couple of extra things that are good about this boss, especially while you're doing it in LFR, is the entire raid is spread, which is tricky for some healers. If you look at sort of a resto shaman, for example, who wants to use chain heal and healing rain, that's not viable in these kind of encounters, especially with the raid as spread as it is. You can see on the left-hand side between the purple pools how spread people are, which really nullifies huge smart heals that need to be close to each other. Fortunately, we don't have that disability. As the resto druid, we can throw rejuves anywhere we want. We can't take maximum effect of efflorescence, which is a bit of a pain in the ass. In fact, I would say as I was playing this and getting back into the routine of playing the resto druid, I didn't use efflorescence anywhere near as much as I should have. I should have been using it a hell of a lot more, and I should have been targeting the melee players with that. And I'll show you a little bit more example of that going on later on. As you can see, UI is also very important towards doing this. Before we get into more resto druid mechanics, is where my character is all nice and open. You can, so I can see very easily I was next to the shards there, and to get the hell away from them. Of course, if you're doing heroic mode, you'll want to be detonating those at the right time and getting away from them so you don't take the explosions. One of the big things I really recommend you get into the habit of doing is not using efflorescence or swift mend on your tank if you can avoid it at all possible. The range is really, really small. So what you'll find is you'll pop the swift mend. If you're just designated to tank healing, that's more than fine. What I started getting into the habit of doing very, very quickly was popping a rejuve on anybody who was in melee range, who was part of like the melee squad. So you've got your DKs, your rogues, and your DPS warriors and all that kind of good stuff. And then I was using swift mend on one of those. So if one of them needed a quick heal, like a rogue would need now, I was popping a rejuve on him and then using that efflorescence there. You can see I've got it down, and now it starts generating huge amounts of healing, which is actually getting used is the big thing. That healing needs to be used. It's wasted if we throw it generally just on the tank. The melee just aren't close enough. And if they're not close enough, we're just wasting a ton of healing that could be going out on people who actually need it. They need that small time hot going on. The other advantage here is clear casting. Now, there isn't a great deal of raid damage on this fight in LFR mode. Of course, I'm not comparing this to heroic mode, where there is tons and tons of raid damage going on with people standing in very dangerous pools, getting detonated and chained and all that kind of groovy stuff. But it doesn't happen in LFR, which is cool. So I'm talking about clear casting more now. In this fight, I focused a lot of my clear casting procs on big healing touches on the tanks. They tend to take the majority of the damage. Whenever it was sort of AoE time like this, I was throwing rejuves. As you can see there, I'm tracking my rejuve on my grid. I'm throwing rejuves wherever they're needed, and I'm using my wild growth, obviously, just to start to top them off. And when I get these, you can see a big healing touch going down on the tanks, landing some massive heals on him at all times. The next boss I decided to show you was this one. I forget his name. He runs around and collects the various things. Now, this fight is probably more beneficial to a resto druid in terms of pre-planning. The raid in general should be stood in the middle here to get a decent distance from epicenter when it goes off, and in order to keep healing nice and tidy. Now, unfortunately, that wasn't the case. Before the fight, I pre-planted my mushrooms directly in the middle, and my plan going into this fight, as all healers should have a plan, was to get the mushrooms down in the middle, and as soon as he did epicenter and people started taking a lot of damages, boom, I could detonate my mushrooms and do a ton of healing to everybody around me, and then I could replant them ready for the next epicenter. It would have made my mana efficiency much, much higher, my healing much more effective, but sometimes it just doesn't work out, especially in LFR, which is why it's quite a cool thing to show you. Now, one of the big issues I had with people being spread here is maximizing my healing effect. It was very difficult with epicenter to really plan it out, especially with the ranged being spread at the same time. It's okay for the melee to spread out, but in general, what you'll find in normal modes and heroic modes is people will be running to the middle to get into the healing ball, which is always handy. It's really handy when that happens. This did not happen in this fight at all. As you can see, people are all over the platform, which made me use rejuve on a much greater. As you can see, I'm using swift mend on the shaman over there. What also bothered me as well is a mage who's not actually in the area. He couldn't be healed. He hadn't walked in. He was AFK or whatever. And I'm constantly trying to heal him. I'm using grid as best I can. You can see I'm trying to click this mage again and trying to get healing on him. And it's just not happening. He's just constantly dying. And I want to be topping people off who need it. In between time, I know that the main damage is coming at epicenter. The main damage source is going to be epicenter, which means I have time. One of the great aspects of mana efficiency, no matter what you're doing, is when is damage coming and do I have a break in between damage? Nice point here where it's obviously getting a little bit behind, but falling down in healing, throw out that tranquility, use that cooldown effectively and get everybody back into a good shape. And I've still got cooldowns ready to go. I've used my 20% extra healing, my Nature's Vigil, but I've still got my Mega Tree of Life Invocation still ready to go. I'm still saving cooldowns and trying to spread them out as much as possible between these epicenters. Epicenters is the most dangerous aspects of this on LFR, and I'm doing my best to conserve my mana. This is a very long fight, even on Looking for Ages. Depending on the DPS, it's a very, very long fight, and as such, you need to be a little bit careful about your mana, which brings me on to Innervate. Innervate, remember, doesn't give you a great deal of mana back. It's very effective, but it's more based on the cooldown. I'm going to be so happy when that mage dies. I know he dies on this video at some point, and it was just so annoying to see this guy on just low health all the time. Very frustrating. Very, very frustrating. Innervate, you want to use it as soon as you go below like 3/4 mana. As soon as that happens, fire off your Innervate to make sure you have it again later in the fight. It's very important that you don't save cooldowns for just when you need it. Like, I'm now, I need Innervate. That's not what you want to be doing. You won't want to do that whatsoever. What you want to be doing is using it as soon as possible so you have it again. Obviously getting much more efficiency out of it and much more usage, which is definitely the winner in this case. Now, as this fight changes phases, the style of the fight changes as well. We have people getting much more gathered now, and I started making more use of mushrooms. Once this started to happen, I was like, oh, cool. Now the guys have gathered up, I can start making better use of mushrooms, better use of wild growth, and better use of my spells. I was getting lower mana, which is always a dangerous thing. I wanted to start using much more normal nourishes to throw around. Again, as I said, with epicenter and stuff, I knew there was a gap in between that, so I could start using nourish a lot more. I was using my nice cheap heal, keep my mana looking after itself until it was necessary. And then we had moments like this with the AoE, in which case it's time to start thinking, crap, I need to AoE heal everybody. In between times, use your nourish. Start thinking about, is this a period of the fight where people aren't really at risk of dying. We don't need to be topping people off the second they take damage, especially in LFR. In Heroic mode, slightly different, obviously. But the playstyle I was going for is, okay, that AoE, very, very dangerous. When the Wild Spark comes, that is very, very dangerous. But in between that is actually quite a relaxing period. And my mana's a little bit low. I'm still waiting for innervate to come back. So I'm going to conserve as much mana as possible. You can see I'm dropping my mushrooms around now to help out the guys. Should it get a little bit behind, I'm going to fire off those mushrooms. Boom. See that? See that healing? Oh, yeah. That is the healing that's going to pop out of there, detonate those mushrooms, huge burst healing onto the raid, and really starting to help guys out. And there I go, replanting my mushrooms for the next time I need them. So this constant switch between tank healing focus and AoE healing focus. In the tank healing phase, I'm fully... Look at that mushroom heal. You know why I turn on my healing demonstration when I do these kind of videos. The great thing about this was the clear ability to just swap between tank healing and decent AoE healing on a burst level. And that is one of the things you want to take most advantage of, is you need to take advantage of that possible burst heal and that possible single target, low cost, nice mana efficiency healing as well. You see, there's no opportunity at this fight to really say, I can stop casting now. That doesn't happen. So if we have to keep casting, we need to be smart about what we're casting and making sure what we cast is very, very efficient and really helpful, which is why this fight was a good demonstration, especially while the raid is so spread out. Remember, your mushrooms don't all have to be in one place. You could see when I was placing those mushrooms, I was placing them in such a fashion that they all hit several different groups. People tend to form a triangle on that fight at that point, so I was taking advantage of that. One mushroom each. It's not the best. It's not the most efficient, but it's the best I can do right now, and it's going to give me nice, low mana, very effective healing when I need it. Every time that Wild Spark AoE goes off, I need to be aware of it. Just moving back to the UI, this phase is obviously a little bit tricky depending on how good your players are. Are they aware they've got the Arcane Explosion? You can see one in the north and you can see one on the side there, all doing their AoE explosion, and thankfully they're moving out of the raid, which makes just this AoE phase the phase I really need to be worried about. Again, Tranquility back up. I used it early in the fight, got my Trank back, can use it again, top off the healers, using it with Nature's Vigil as well to give myself some nice bonus healing to that Tranquility, should top the raid off, as it has done. As you can see, again, planting those mushrooms. We're going to get these AoE phases. Always going to happen. Let's get the mushrooms down for whenever we need them. This big AoE is coming. Boom. Let's fire off some mushrooms. Let's get that healing out there and help out the guys. And you're just doing it as efficient as possible. I'm trying to look after my mana desperately. Nicely, I can see I've got a nice boss mod, and I can also see, because my UI is not cluttered, I don't have a cluttered UI, I can see nice and easily that I have now the debuff, and I've got space to move around. A lot of people, especially healers, are focused too much on their grid. You need to have free space to see what's around you, where you can stand, where you can be effective. And even as a resto druid, one of the great powers is I'm out of the group right now. Because of this debuff, I'm away from the group. But what I can do is still do very effective healing. The raid's starting to get in real trouble now. Let's get back in there, blow some cooldowns, and start throwing out some big heals as much as humanly possible. Let's use those mushrooms. You can see, blowing those cooldowns, bringing me back into the game. Got my innervate back for a third time, making maximum use of that innervate. So make sure you're using it just below 3/4 mana. As soon as you hit that level, fire off the innervate. Get it on cooldown so it can come back and it can be used again. See again, get the debuff, move the hell out of there. Very, very much enjoyed the Resto Druid. Able to cope with so many different situations. Raids spread out, no problem. Raids gathered, even better. I can make use of mushrooms. Raids spread out, can't use mushrooms. Use something else. Make best use of it. And make much better use than I do of Swiftmend. In the final fight, I did get to use Swiftmend a lot more, but I'm not going to show you an entire boss fight to show Swiftmend. That would be a waste of your life and mine. There you go, some Resto Druid action for you guys. I hope you enjoy some pretty numbers. You take it easy, ballers, and have a great day.